In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can identify your painting skill plateau and how to get over it. So for any of us who've been painting for any amount of time, we understand that it takes practice to get better. But there are problems that are inherent with that whole process. Initially, when you first start painting, and this is really aimed towards the beginners, as many of my videos are, but when you first start painting, the trick is that you look at amazing work that you see in magazines and online and on box fronts and all that kind of stuff, and you want to do that, which is why you're getting into painting in the first place. And you understand, sort of, that you're not going to be there right off the bat. There's probably, at least with me, there was like, well, maybe I'm like a genius and I just never knew it, but it doesn't seem to be the case. So yeah, the problem is that when you start, you don't have the skill, but you also don't seem to have the patience. Many people in painting and in any other type of skill will realize that not only do they not have what they need to have skill-wise to be able to produce what they're looking for, and they need to learn and go beyond that. They also find, and I found this same issue, that they don't have the patience to want to put more practice into it and to understand that it's going to take time. All of this kind of stemmed to some degree from an article that I read by someone named Michelle Nicolaisen, and I was reading it. It was more about my day job, which is UX UI design, and she was writing an article about that, and I came across it. But I started, as I was reading the article, realizing how much of the stuff that she was kind of mentioning was stuff that I had been thinking about for quite some time as it relates to miniatures painting. And the fact of the matter is that when you start out, you've got pretty much no skill and no patience, and you have to try to work up to get both of those things, leveled up. Obviously, we all know that our skill needs to be leveled up so that we can do better, but a lot of us don't realize that we also need to work on our patience. A big portion of getting your skill to progress is to keep working on the same thing over and over again. There are lots of different techniques all throughout the miniature painting, entire tool shed of different things that we've got that we can throw at these little plastic, soldiers. And the fact of the matter is that if you try to do some washes at one day, and then a couple weeks later you do some of this, some dry brushing, and you do some, and you just kind of scattershot everything around, you don't get good at any one of them. You just kind of throw techniques at what you're working on willy-nilly because you're like, well, maybe this is the technique that will do it. But without the skill and the practice on that same technique over and over, you just don't really see any improvement. And as humans, we find improvement to be pretty important. And as humans living in the 21st century, we also have a little bit less patience than we used to, I have a suspicion. So between those two things mixed together, we find that we don't really want to practice much, but we would like the results as quickly as possible. And that's kind of a problem. So the trick is that, and if you've been doing with it and stuck with it, you've started to realize that as you keep painting and as you paint, miniature after miniature, you will start to use techniques more frequently. You will start to gain skill in those techniques and get better. And then you will get to a point, and this is kind of the point of the whole video, where you will sort of hit a plateau and you'll keep painting and painting and painting, and you're just not seeing any great improvement. Going from zero to, wherever you are now, it's relatively quick, just learning the techniques. You can really get good quickly if you just pay attention to the techniques and work on them. But then you get to a plateau where all of a sudden you find it's difficult to keep getting better, and that will dishearten you in some fashion. Now here's why it shouldn't dishearten you, and it's something that a lot of people miss. I've recently noticed it, and in reading this article, I'll link it below. But in reading this article, I started to realize, that's been happening to me as well, and that is, your skill may not necessarily go up as you keep practicing and practicing and practicing and you're getting better at it, but you start to get faster. I used to look at 5 or maybe 10 models as a I'm not going to say a death sentence, but I would look at it and go, oh, that's going to take me forever. I'm going to have to work on that stuff for so long to get 10 guys, which is why I was really hesitant of getting into Warhammer 40K, let's say, back in, like in the late 90s and the early 2000s, because I didn't want to have paint that many dudes. I was always looking for skirmish games to find games where maybe you only needed 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, and that was your entire army, because I looked at that as being, well, I could probably, after a good long time, I could finish 8 guys. I could finish painting 8 different figures and get them to where I want them, and then I can start to play. Well, the fact is that if you want to play the bigger army games, you have to paint more guys than that. And the trick is that if you practice more and more and more, it becomes easier. Nowadays, I look at 5 or 10 miniatures as, well, I'll get this done pretty quickly. Now, partially it's because I'm not trying to make a golden demon out of every single one of them, admittedly, but also it's because I've been doing it enough and pushing myself and trying to paint and build, but predominantly, if I can, paint as much as possible. That helps you speed up and you go through things pretty quickly. Last week I did a video about the new Shadespire game coming out from Games Workshop. They sent me a copy early, and so I wanted to do a video about it. So I got that box on Friday. I showed it off on Saturday and Sunday during 2 different live shows, the insides and stuff like that. And then Sunday afternoon, I built the models and then primed them. And then I started painting them after I got home from work on Monday night. And I had 8 models done to, I think, relatively good, quality by the time I filmed on Thursday. And I didn't even really get to paint much on Wednesday because I had other stuff going on. So I painted Monday night, Tuesday night, and finished up the rims around the bases in black on Thursday. So I was able to crank through them pretty quickly, but it's because I've been practicing. I'm not necessarily getting tons better, but I'm getting tons faster. And that's important because it really helps you, because now you don't look at, well, I have to keep practicing for all of this time to even get a little bit better, because now you look at it and say, I can get so many more models done in the same amount of time. And for those of us who've got a basement full of models, this is pretty good news. A big portion of speeding up is, besides the fact that you start to get more used to the techniques that you're using in the painting in the situation, but you also start to understand that there are times when you can do some shortcuts, which to pretty much every eye out there will be completely indiscernible between the one that took you 2 hours to do versus the one that took you maybe a half an hour to do, as far as like a specific thing. You can work on this sword and layer in washes and highlights and do stuff like that, and you can work on it for like a good hour, and it can look. But on the other hand, you could also get it done in about 10 minutes, and it would look just about the same, but maybe just a touch bit different. Now again, like I said, if you're going for display painting, we're talking a totally different animal. But if you're talking about getting guys on the table, that's an important thing, and it takes experience to be able to recognize that and to know that it is now time to maybe make a couple of shortcuts that don't really cost quality, and you get to the skill level where you can do it competently. And that's the big benefit to keeping going and to keep practicing. So the important part is to understand you're going to hit a plateau, and you're going to get to a point where your skills are at a level that you certainly did not have when you first started. But then you're not going to see the growth as much anymore. I've talked about diminishing returns in another video a long time ago. You can check that video out. Pachow. This is a bit different because it's not necessarily as much about that. It's more about how, as you start to find that your skill level is not necessarily increasing a ton, you do start to actually get faster, because that's where the muscle memory and the practice starts to go. The techniques you've got down, it just takes you less time to do them, which means more painted models at the end of any given paint session, which is always a good thing. So understand that the plateau is coming. If you've just started, you're going to improve and improve and improve, and always go back and look at your older models and compare them to your new models, because really that's the only comparison that you should be concerning yourself with. Don't look at stuff on Cool Mini or not. Don't look at in the high numbers, the 9.5s and stuff like that. You can look at them. Just don't compare yourself to them. Don't go look in the White Dwarf or the Golden Demon or the Crystal Brush and all those things and go, man, those guys are way better than I am. Look at what you've done in the past. Look what you did a month ago. Look what you did 6 months ago, and go, wow, I've really improved over that amount of time, and that's great. That's where you're going. And then start paying attention and noticing as you keep doing it and as you keep powering through and keep the pressure on, start to notice how much faster you get.